All right. I'll put it here, and then we can just start with your name and birth date and what branch of the service you were in. And it's going. So.
Hi, my name is Joseph Sachen. I'm 93 years old, soon to be 94. And I was in the Army in the tank with the 1st Armored Division. Now, when I got into service, I immediately, after 6 weeks, got on a ship and was headed out towards the sea. And then we went to the Straits of Gibraltar. And when we landed at the Straits of Gibraltar, we didn't land at the Straits of Gibraltar. We went on to a place called Mars El Kabir, which is right near Iran. Now, the 2nd Armored Division, which Patton had, they landed in Casablanca, and the 82nd Airborne landed in Algiers. So that morning of the 8th of November, we made a landing. Now, the reason why it wasn't successful is General Mark Clark went in to Africa and he talked to the head general from the French military, and they made all arrangements, he says, and they did not like the British. So they said, remember, we don't like the British. So when we came in, we made the initial landing and our tanks were ready to come down. They fired on us, and we wondered why, and they hit the ship next to me, and 3,400 guys dropped down and died. They all drowned together because they were heavy packed. When we got up on shore, we immediately started moving. And since my job was a little different, I was in a scout for a reconnaissance squadron. And that I'd find out where their tanks were, and then radio them back, and then we'd have a combat. And after we got pushed a little bit, there's 5 boatloads full of doctors and nurses, and getting off, and 3 of them capsized, and the 2 got on okay, but everybody else was safe. So some of the GIs, and this is what they told me, they found this old shack, dirty, filthy, rat infested and all that. They cleaned it out the best they could, and since all the instruments were wet and all that from the Mediterranean, which is not a clean place, they took all the instruments out and they sterilized them with alcohol. Okay, so after that, we made a push and we started going towards Tunisia. That was when Rommel was pushed back from Libya, from the British. And we got up to all the way to Tunisia. We were on our way to Libya, but we didn't have to. We had 132 tanks, and they knocked out 130 of them. And most of them got killed because they couldn't get out of the tanks the way it was. On the side we had the ammunition and gas and phosphorus and all. So where are the people that died? They went back to Iran, buried them on this hillside. I still can see it today. And then now when Algiers went the other way, they dug them all up. They moved them to Carthage. Carthage is in Tunis, in the capital city. It's an American cemetery, and it's maintained every day. It's clean and all that, but nobody visits it. They all visit Normandy. But the guys are 17 to 25 years old. So then we came back, and they were still fighting us pretty bad. And sometime later, we went to Kasserine Pass, where we got pushed back. That was the first big battle we ever lost. And so the Germans came, and
that's okay.
No, and the Germans came in. So they had a whole group of tanks and stuff, and A, B, C and D Company was in 81st Armored Reconnaissance Squadron. I was in B Company. Now, they captured A Company in its entirety, everybody, all the officers, men, everybody. They captured and killed most of our guys in B Company, but we were in the 3rd Platoon and we were way out. And when we came back, they killed most of those guys they captured. And then I was captured myself for 6 hours before we were able to make our way, see fit, by winking and using our eyes. Because the 6 people that we had, 3 of them they shot, and there was 3 of them against 3 of us, and that's when we overtook them, and now they're gone. And so then we fought and fought and fought, and we were able to make it. Now Rommel, he was getting a lot of his ammunition, which they needed, off of Sicily, southern Italy, and it go right to a place called Mature in Tunisia, and they had all that equipment. In the meantime, General Patton came up to see how the war was going along in Tunisia, and he says, "Where's all the tanks at?" Well, he says, "They were all knocked out except these 2. He said, "Okay, I'll get you." So he radioed back, or went back to Casablanca, and he brought a whole bunch of tanks up from the 2nd Armored Division, and that's how we ended the war. Kasserine Pass was one of the most vicious battles we ever had, and people know about it. Well, after that campaign, they took 2 out of each company, and other units too, that they were going on a detail to go to a place called Sidi Bel Abbes. Now that's down in the Sahara Desert. It's a big prison compound, and they had all these Nazis there and Italians in these big stockyards. In my job, I worked the tower with a machine gun, and then I'd have to be sergeant of the guard once or twice, where I'd give the guy my gun, and I'd go inside and have some coffee and take a look around. After that, they called us back. So I went back to our bivouac in Tunisia, and the whole group got on the trucks and trains, the tanks and all. We went all the way to a place called Rabat, which is in French Morocco. We had a lot of education there, where we had to study the silhouettes of American airplanes, because we were shooting their airplane down. And because when they came over, we didn't know what they were. So they gave us that education. They kept us working. And then they decided to take us all back to Mars Al Kabir, where we came in. And then we were doing some beach landings. My brother was in the 1st Infantry Division. I didn't know this. He was right alongside of us when we went to Iran. And I never were able to find him, except when I found out he was an APO #1, and they just left Casablanca area and they're on their way to Mars Al Kabir. I said, "Oh boy, we're going there and I'll be able to spot them." Well, by the time we got there, they had gone into Sicily and taken Sicily with Patton. And then we were ready doing beach lands, and we went ahead and landed in a place south of Salerno. Now that was an easy landing because there was nobody around. We had a 3rd Infantry Division took care of a lot of those guys, because Audie Murphy was in that 3rd Division. So as we progressed, we went up to a place called Capua, where we bivouacked, and all it did is rain. It was an olive orchard. So after a short period of good rest and all that, they had a big battle at Monte Cassino. And Monte Cassino is just southeast of Rome, and we were pretty close. So we would go there, and people, divisions, they just had a field day shooting at them. And then it was my turn to go. Well, I got up to maybe 3/4 of the way, and I couldn't do it anymore. All the guys around me got killed. So I went back down, and we waited for the bombers. 100 flying fortresses at a time would bomb that place and still couldn't get them out of there. But I had a chance to visit it years later. And we finally had the Polish troops there, and they climbed the hill and they took the Monte Cassino. After that, we went back to our little bivouac for a couple of days, and we went out to the Mediterranean Sea and around and went up to a place called Anzio on the Tuna. Well, we made a landing there. It was okay for a little while, and all of a sudden their barrage comes in. Instead of digging a foxhole, he says, you got to cover it. So we dig the foxhole as hard as we can with our little shovels that we had, and then we had to find logs and all that and put over the logs to camouflage us. And that's where we lived for 4.5 months underground. Everybody, not just me, including the generals. Well, we had combat against those guys for 4.5 months. And the thing about it mostly is that they had 33 divisions against us. And his name is Field Marshal Kesselring. They also had the largest guns that were ever made, 2 of them. And they were up in the mountains, and they would fire at us, but mainly they'd go over our heads because they would try to hit those ships. Well, they had, there was one that's called Anzio Annie, and they brought that Anzio Annie back to the United States, and you're still at Aberdeen right now. It's on railroad cars. These shells that go 26 miles. If you can imagine how far 26 miles is, you know, that's quite a ways. So they would fire that all the time. They would fire one shell, and they had about 30 people on each gun. That's how big it was. The barrel was quite large, about 2 feet around, and the rifle was about 40 feet long, so they can get a lot of distance that way. And then it had a booster in that shell. And one day, I forget where I was, but they wanted to shell us. They were going to push us back into the Mediterranean. So they started shelling and shelling, and then there's a field hospital there, the 47th Medics. On one side they had all the ammunition and gas. So at one time they hit that thing, and everything went. All heck broke loose. And what they did is they killed a lot of the soldiers that were wounded, getting surgery and getting their things done. And they all killed a lot of doctors. So that was really bad. Well, they knocked out all the generators, and the 4 nurses were having flashlights doing the doctor's work of major surgery, you know, bad head injuries and stuff like that. In all of World War II, Pacific and Atlantic, this is the only woman that ever received a Silver Star. It was on the Anzio beachhead. We had 82,000 casualties, and there's a huge cemetery there. Probably never visited except the people that were in Italy. Well, we were in Italy about almost 2.5 years before they made the initial landing at Normandy. Anyway, we went ahead, we took Rome, we went into Rome, our tanks rolled down, and we all had a great time drinking their vino and stuff like that, just for a little bit, and we kept on moving. From then on, they had to reorganize, and there's a lot of recruits that didn't know anything about armored warfare. So they had a lot of training to do. And as we progressed up to Florence, Italy, we went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa and all that. We took all those little cities. One day around Modena, that's where they make the Lamborghinis and Ferraris, I said, well, I'm just going to go and see if I can find a factory. So I hopped in a Jeep. We don't have windshields on the Jeep. They're all flat. And then I hear the choo, choo, some bullets going right past my ear. So I immediately pulled into an empty garage, which is for a garage for mechanics. And then I said, what am I going to do? So I saw a big mirror and I had a camera. So I took my picture in through the mirror. I still have that. And and there was two girls outside. They were under the rubble, and they had flowers in their hands, waiting for him to come in. And I says, "Did you see the Americanos?" And they said, "No, not yet. Come pretty soon." So I don't know how I got out of there. I finally drove out and hightailed it back to the lines. And I told the captain, I said, where I was. He said, "You can't go there. We haven't taken it yet." So that was my part. As we progressed north, we went all the way up to Florence, which is north. We did not go to Venice because the eastern part, right down the middle, was all controlled by the British. And we were the other allies on the western part, all the way through the whole thing. We went up to Milan, and just when I got there, they had captured Mussolini and his girlfriend and 5 other fascists. And they strung them up by their feet, and it was quite a sight to see. So I got my camera and I took a couple pictures of that. And I have those today. Then the 10th Mountain Division, we got up pretty far. They came over because they were in the Italian Alps. So lots of snow. And they were fighting there, just going really bad, losing a lot of men. So I went on detached service for a while. I was a skier. And I stayed with them for a while, and then I went back to my unit after we took it. Later, I went up through Austria and all the way up to Dachau, which is just west of Munich, and that was the prison camp for all the Jews that were captured and ready to be executed and gassed and burnt. So we helped liberate them, and it was a good feeling for me, but they were pretty bad. Then, after that was done, we went into a church or something like that, and we took all the women, older women mainly, and put them in the church and showed them a film, all that. When they came out, they did not believe what we saw. Getting back to my brother in the 1st Infantry Division, I heard that when they landed at Normandy, he got hit in the water, but he didn't even make it to land. But he lived, and he was in a place called Kornbergsheim, which is just a little bit east of Stuttgart. Well, I said, "Hey, adios, you guys," and I hopped in a Jeep and went to see him, and I saw him for the first time in 4.5 years. That was kind of nice. We had a couple of brews together and just meeting. And I went back, I said, "This is all I want. I'm going home." He said, what do you mean?" "Well, I can do what I want now. The war's over." So next day I got over to Marseille and did a little gambling with all the soldiers around. And then we got on the ship. We came home. When we got home, there was a lot of people waiting, but none of my family because they lived too far. So we walked down the plank, and I was pretty beat up. You know, yeah, you didn't get cleaned up like you would your clothes and all that. When I come off the ship, they gave me an unglazed donut. It says next, and they put me in a bus and took me to a barracks, and the MP was in the barracks, big, strong, heavy-set woman, and watching over me, so they didn't know. I didn't know what was going to happen either. And then I got on a train and went home. And when the first time I've seen my parents, and they were really happy about it. Because in Africa, I didn't write for several months, and they didn't know if I was dead or not. But it all in all, for me, it turned out real good.
Great.
All right?
Yeah. Yeah, so we could, I guess, rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about your childhood, growing up, where you grew up, a little bit of your life before going
I
into
grew up in
service.
Racine, Wisconsin, and I was starting to ski down these small little hills with ice skates, and then somebody says, "Hey, I got a pair of skis." Well, I didn't use those. My father went to a hardware store, and I saw some skis, and this is when I was 5 years old. And I asked him, I begged him to get them for me. They only had the leather strap over the toe. So he did, he got them for me. And then as time progressed, I got better and better and better. So at the University of Wisconsin, where I attended, they had a big ski jump there, so I went to watch them. By that time I was like 17 or 18. And so I'd watch them jump, and I'd be talking to some of those guys from Norway. They have a club, and they seem to like me going there every day. They said, "Well, you want to learn how to jump?" I said, "Yeah." So I was a ski jumper, the big 90-meter for until I was gotten a little bit older. And then that's when they called for service. As soon as the bombs hit Pearl Harbor, you couldn't sign up to get in any service because the lines are too long. Everybody that I knew, single, would sign up. They were all mad. You know, if we lose the United States by the Japanese and the Nazis, like you can imagine what will happen to you. It'd be terrible. You'd be all slaves. They were mean, both sides, the SS and also the Japanese. Today, they're much more mellow. And when I came home, went to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, they immediately took me out and brought me over to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington, D.C. And I was working on booby traps and high explosives. And there wasn't much time. 6 weeks, I was on a ship going overseas and making that invasion.
Okay. You said your brother was in service as well.
My brother was okay. We had some brews together.
Yeah.
And then he came home and I came home. Now, a lot of people think that Normandy is the first time they landed in Europe. We were in Italy, and that's part of Europe. We were in Italy 2.5 years before they landed at Normandy. And the Normandy going into Berlin was about 8 months, where we had about 3.5, almost 4 years. They asked me where I slept that night. Well, in the war that I was in, you had to take ground. And when you took ground, you couldn't sleep in your same bed. You slept under a tank, you slept under your Jeep, you slept in a Jeep, you did anything, and you try to get all the rest. Back in Africa, I remember that the Americans were using the old World War I, where they would dig a long trench and all get in there. That was really a mistake. The Germans would bring their tanks in and do S-turns and just crush them to death. It was pretty sad. And the food we had, it was nothing. It was just mostly canned rations with a little can opener. We get meat and beans, some crackers, and I believe 4 cigarettes. At that time, everybody smoked, and I mean everybody. When I was in the hospital, the doctor lit my cigarette. So I'm telling you, this is the way it was in those days. They didn't know any better. The food was not too bad. I only had turkey one time full of water because it rained so hard from where the kitchen was to where my pup tent was. It rained so hard and filled up with water, but I ate it anyway. It was good.
That was Thanksgiving dinner, yeah?
Thanksgiving Day. I can't remember what year. 1940, 42 or 43, not 43, Thanksgiving. We bivouacked in an olive orchard.
And what does that mean, bivouacked?
That's when you all get together. That's a place to stay.
Okay.
You got soldiers all over say, now we're going to bivouac at Doc's house. So they all come over there and we stayed there. But you couldn't be in one spot. You can't have everybody because they would come over at night and drop their bombs and we'd all run for cover. It was pretty hectic. 4.5 months of that. Those big guns they had, we lost a lot of good guys. One of the shows, I forget the name of the show, Jim Arness, he was there, he got wounded too. Then what happened after we made some of the movements, they took a couple of divisions and went around Italy and went up to the place in southern France where they made the invasion. Now, the cemetery, if you've ever seen one in Normandy, is beautiful, maintained real well. Well, you can say it's the same thing. That's the way it is in Carthage and in Anzio. Then Anzio has a huge cemetery. They have, and about 2 miles away, they have another cemetery with it's a German cemetery. They got 32,000 soldiers buried there. So that's a lot. It was a tough battle. It's good. But the reason why we have 33 divisions against us, because they were pulling them off the Russian front. And these guys are all hardened soldiers. And those are the guys. I remember one night we heard that they were going to parachute in and make it run for it with their tanks and infantry. So we tripled the guard, tripled it. And they never came, so we were happy about that. There's not too much to see in Anzio, but we're not this Pope, but I think Paul John used to go for his retreat. It happened to be in that middle of that Anzio beachhead was an old little knocked out building, really small, with bricks all over. And that's where Nero went. That was where he had tried to escape. Nero burned by the fiddlers, whatever it was. That was great.
Now, you said you were a recon scout, yeah?
Huh?
You said you were a recon scout.
Yeah, I was a recon scout. I worked behind enemy lines in either a light tank or a Jeep, and mostly Jeep because I was going fast. At Anzio one time, I drove down the road. It ended. I kept on going, and the machine gun went right around from about 5 feet on one side, and it stopped right up my ear each time it sprayed. And if you'd gone another inch, they would have got me in the head. I had gone on a patrol in Italy one time with one of the officers, and as we did, we were making an advancement to find out where they were, and it was an open field with a few trees here and there. So here comes 2 airplanes right over here. They were Stukas. That's a fixed gear airplane, and they were screaming. And so one of them peeled off and came back and started with his .50 caliber. That's where I got nicked in the shin. The other one is they dropped a 500-pound bomb They killed a lot of guys, and that's where I hurt my back. But I didn't know I was pretty tough. After they bombed it, I got out the hole and saw one of the guys, our first sergeant. He was buried alive, and I could see his hand moving. I went over there and dug him out, and he never forgot that through all the years we've been going to these reunions. Of course, he's dead now, but he was a little older than me. I don't know, I think I just about covered most of it without my notes.
Did you want to grab your notes and maybe see if you missed anything? Or you feel
Well,
pretty
I mean,
confident?
it'll be more formal by reading them, but everything I said is the way it was. The only thing I say is that landing in Africa, when the nurses land in Africa, they didn't know a thing about burns. In our whole division, you get burnt. You burn alive, you know. I could see a lot of guys were trying to get out of the tanks, and you could see their femur and tibia and fibula. They didn't make it. So they were supposed to take care of other people with burns. I had a first-degree burns on both hands, but when they went to treat them, they didn't know what to do. Because they were so used to giving measles shots and this kind of vaccinations and all that, but they learned in a hurry, and they all got to be real good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you sustain any other wounds other than the ones you had mentioned, or?
Well, combat is no fun, and I can't remember. You were always shooting your gun.
Yeah.
My weapon, everybody had a weapon. You had to sleep with it. I had a submachine gun, Thompson submachine gun, like they used to use with a big clip. And then at times I'd pick up a rifle or something from a dead soldier. I had about 5 different hats, with the steel hats, and because they were nicked, they got holes in it and all. So I'd pick up another someplace. So I had some pretty close calls there, a lot of close calls. Other than that, as far as the war stories, you're just making your advances every day, and at night, and you come back, and you give the information, and we'd all write it down. Now, we entered Rome. I was in Rome about 4 days before we took it, and I could see all the big Mark IV tanks with all the German soldiers leaving when we took it. I had another guy with me in the Jeep when we made the push, and you could hear the machine gun fire, so he jumped out and hopped in one of the tanks with his buddy, and I was by myself. It was quite a chore. I'll never forget that. But most of the time, you just did your daily thing. It's just like going to work here. What did you do today? The same thing I did yesterday, you know. But that's the whole thing in a nutshell.
Did you choose the Army, or did?
It was Army.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember one thing. In that part of the world, there was not one Marine. Only Army. All the Marines were in the Pacific, doing a good job.
Now the patch on your shirt there, the old Ironsides.
Yeah.
What can you talk about that a bit?
Now, Old Ironside is when they first organized the 1st Armored Division. That's a division. The first time they had a whole division of tanks. They were looking for a name, and they thought and thought and thought, and General Magruder, he was troubled to get a name. And then Patton had his 2nd Armored Division. He called it Hell on Wheels. So we said, well, Leslie, what are we going to call it? You know, what are we going to call it? So he come up with the idea of the Constellation, the boat. That was the first boat to get in combat and all that. So he says, that's a good one. So we've been working with that all the time. As in fact, when one of the big reunions we had in Fort Bliss, they had a captain dressed like a captain from way back when in Revolutionary War. You know, and we call him Old Ironsides. That's what it was. And he liked the name so much he called it Old Ironsides. Now during World War II, we had 26 divisions in the Europe and in the China. You know, some of the islands, the tanks. 26 divisions. Today, there's only one division. That's the 1st Armored Division. They started with it and they're finishing with it.
Great.
Pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
There's some things that I left out, but I'm not going to talk about them.
That's okay. You don't have to mention anything you don't want to.
No, they're pretty bad.
And did you receive any medals or commendations?
Yeah, I got 2 Purple Hearts and a Silver Star.
And after the war, what did you do
After the war, because I was a musician also, I played with the big bands and piano. I came home and I was looking for work, and I would play in nightclubs and hotels and all that. I used to play for Elizabeth Taylor and all her friends at a party at the Beverly Hills Hotel. I've done so much of that. So finally one day I get a call that says they're looking for a musician. And they need an accordion player, not a piano player. Because in Korea there's no pianos at that time. It was a 3rd world country. You know, there's not even a road, nothing. They had nothing here. So I had an accordion, and I was able to take that all over, put it on my shoulders and play. We did 4 to 5 shows every day for 6 months, every day. And what would they do to fly us from one place to another? We had the DC-3, which was pretty good. And then most of the time we had L5s, which is a 2-seater light plane, and they would fly us all over. And we had a general in charge of the facility in Korea. He was in charge of the United Nations forces. There were so many different countries. Well, he was a major in Africa with me, and he knew that I was coming off there, so he always waited to when the plane landed at headquarters, and they would take care of me, so I was happy. We did a lot of shows there. We covered almost every city in Taipei, Taiwan. Taipei is the capital, and Taiwan is the cities, and each person gave us a gift. I had them for years and years, and finally we got rid of them. They were nice gifts. There was the horns from an animal, you know, stuff like that. And when we got to Taipei, they had convertibles there, a bunch of them. And we each sat on a convertible going through the parade, and there was 1 million people clapping for us. That was quite a thing.
Wow.
So then I came back, and that's when I started. I had many things going. I went back and played with another band for a while, and I said, I'm out of here. I went to school at the University of Wisconsin. I actually didn't graduate from there because the war, but I finished it out here under the GI Bill at Loyola University. It was an all-men's school at that time. Mm-hmm. Right. So.
And I'm sorry, how old were you when you went into service?
I can't exactly remember. I have to figure it out. Either 17 or 18. Mm-hmm. They give us a man's job right away.
Yeah.
But I could handle it. You know.
And did you have any other siblings other than the one brother, or do you have any sisters or anything?
I, one brother and 2 sisters.
Okay.
They all died except one sister. She's 99, going to be 100 in August.
Wow. Wow.
That's real why. It was interesting. The whole war, I wouldn't do it again for $1 billion. But I had to go through it, And I have memories of it and also nightmares occasionally. My wife wakes me up and says, "Hey, okay." I don't know, I'm half asleep when that happens.
God bless you.
That's about.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing it with me.
Okay. It's just, there's a lot more to it, but I can't talk about it.
That's okay. You don't have to.
Yeah, it was gruesome. They were mad at us, we were mad at them, and that's all it takes.
Yeah.
When the British came by from Libya up to Tunisia, and the Americans were coming down, who met the American? He was a sergeant in my outfit in the reconnaissance, 81st Army reconnaissance, and they were able to shake hands. So that's how they rejoined there. We cut off everybody.
So you were under General Patton's command? Is it?
No, never,
Never.
never. He had his own command,
Okay.
2nd Armored Division.
Okay.
When I go out, sometimes I go out for 2 or 3 days. I wouldn't come back either because of fire or, I'm trying to observe what's happening. It was not easy. It was pretty difficult.
Would you go out by yourself, or would you?
Yeah. Sometimes usually 5 guys. I have been going by myself occasionally, not too far, but with 5. And I'd always come back at least with 1 other guy on me.
And
They were pretty good shots.
how far forward would you go scouting?
Oh, I've been.
Would it?
I worked behind enemy lines quite a ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes, and sometimes just about 100 and 200 yards. You know, that's pretty close.
Yeah.
When they're approaching, you have to look out. The Mark IV tanks are excellent. And excellent. The 88 guns, they use them for aircraft and also for combat against other tanks. They're real accurate. Now, when I was at that prison camp guarding it, I met 2 prisoners. And one was Helmut and the other guy's from Joseph. And I went over to see Helmut, and he was so surprised being a guard and him being a prisoner. And I met his family, and my family met him, and we had a nice dinner. We talked.
This was years later.
Oh, that was like 60 years later.
Wow.
You know, and he's around. They had another meeting about 45 years after the war. The 10th Panzer Division, Rommel, and our 1st Armored Division met at a banquet in Germany. And they all got to be friends because they're all human.
Yeah.
They weren't savages. They were very intelligent people. And so were the Americans. You know? So an intelligent person against another intelligent person, it had to be the leadership. It's telling them what to do. And they took orders good.
Do you remember the name of the camp that you helped liberate?
In Dachau,
In Dhaka.
in Germany? Yeah, Dachau. They got, the Auschwitz is in Poland, and Dachau is right next to Munich, and that's where a lot of people visit. They still have some of the tables they used to whip them with, and they also have a bunch of pictures and everything like that. It's really interesting. They kept a couple of the barracks up. Barracks would hold 30 people. They had 300 people in it. And it was quite a mess and really had a stench. Today I can smell it. You never get rid of that. It's so bad.
It's terrible.
Other than that, I was happy to get home.
Yeah. And what did you do when you got home? I mean, initially, did you just relax?
I played piano band, and then I was doing all, and then they asked me to go on that USO trip.
Okay.
I
So you
made
went right into
I made 7 trips to Korea during their war.
Wow.
All 7. Sometimes it'd be just Christmas. Sometimes it'd be one all summer, 6 months. Most of the time was 3 weeks. And you had to be back at a certain time if you want to go to school. I remember when I went up and told the dean, I said, well, can I have that extra day? He said, no. He said, why? I said, well, I want to go over to Korea and entertain the troops. Oh, okay. So that worked out fine for me.
That's all it took, huh?
Yeah. And today, I had the privilege of going on an honor flight. It was great going to Washington, D.C. and looking at the memorial that we fought so hard, and now they remember us of what we have done. So really happy about that. Now, also the tomb of the unknown soldier is guarded by members of the 3rd Division, and they were to right down. They went ahead of us in Italy when they first landed, and it's still the same division, but different people naturally. That trip was unreal.
Was that your first time in Washington?
No, we were at Fort Belvoir. I went to Washington twice, I think.
Okay.
Fort Belvoir, the gate where the guard is, you go on that, on the side, over the fence, and you were in Washington. It's the brains of the United States Army. Anything that they have, they're gonna be designed there, and only special people are sent there. I don't know how I made it, but I mustered out of all the guys that went into service. I mean, that was it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your story with me.
Was that good enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know what else to say.
That's it.
Yeah, you can cut some of that.